Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hashrate. My guest today is David Johnston of Morpheus AI. Welcome back to the show, David. How you doing?
It's good to be here, Mark. It's been a crazy couple of months, and I've been loving all your content on Decentralized AI, BitTensor, everything else.
Well, thank you, my friend. Very much appreciate the praise. It's very kind of you. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, obviously, this whole decentralized AI thing has been a rabbit hole that has fascinated me. These past, basically since like end of December is when I started getting an inkling about it. I was kind of like, because at first it sounded like, oh, this is like bullshit AI meme coins, right? And it's like, oh, okay, crypto people doing crypto things once again. But then as I started reading reports actually from Delphi Digital, from Masari and some others, I started to understand how these things work. And I was like, oh shit, this is like a real thing, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So yeah. So before we begin, because I know you got a lot of news, there's a lot of stuff that's happened since you were last here. Very briefly, I just want to go over for people who don't know, what is Morpheus?
Morpheus is a platform for building smart agents and deploying smart agents. And it's really focused on basically building a free future, right? How do we do this in a way that's open source and permissionless and anybody can run on their own hardware, right? And so the easiest way to think about it is what Ethereum is to smart contracts. Morpheus is to smart agents, right? Morpheus is not making smart agents. It's giving people all the tools, right? The compute that they need. It's giving them the capital that they need, right? It's giving them the platform, right? So that's the simple way to think about it.
Yeah. So the sort of my initial take on it was you are well. So first of all, when we did the last show, I actually didn't understand it very well. I've now read up on it, and I think I understand it a lot better now. And I've now talked to a lot of the other crypto AI things, so I kind of understand the box that they're in and the box that you're in. Very broadly, through the use of AI agents, you're trying to create the antithesis of open AI in a lot of ways, right? So open AI is not really open. It's a very Orwellian named company at the moment. It's extremely closed, and it's trying to shove through new regulations to create regulatory capture. So that it's left to us, the Rebel Alliance out here on the internet, to actually construct a true open AI. So that is, and your approach is very different from everyone else's, and we'll get into that in a second. But first, at the top of the show, I want you to give us an update on what's happened since your last visit. I know there's been a lot of activity, so give us your news.
So I think you actually get credit for probably doing the first podcast on Morpheus ever. And really? So I hope you know you were first. I've done a lot of podcasts since, but I think you were the very first, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it has been wild to see the community reaction and how much support there is for decentralized AI. I mean, keep in mind, there's no Morpheus company. There's no foundation, no PR. There was no hype. It was literally just word of mouth, people talking about this idea of having a personal AI and it being fully open source. And the fair launch started February 8th, and 100,000 staked ETH have flowed in, which is like $400 million, right? Depending on your ETH price, right? In support, right? And the cool thing is it uses this fair launch model where people are just contributing the yield, right? From the staked ETH. Their principal isn't at risk, right? They can withdraw their ETH whenever they want. They're just donating that staked ETH reward every day into the protocol on liquidity of Morpheus. So there's not even a treasury of Morpheus. It's literally just going into the protocol on liquidity, and that's going to bootstrap a Uniswap pool on Arbitrum. So we're getting close to day 90 where people can claim their more tokens, right, that they've been earning for providing staked ETH or providing code to the network. All those rewards have been accruing the last 90 days, and so that'll start the whole process off is May 8th when the claims go live and the first Uniswap pool gets set up.
Yeah, so you guys basically said, all right, people out there who are excited about Morpheus, give us your staked ETH. So not regular ETH, just staked ETH. And give it to us, stake it with us. Were they staking it in a liquidity pool, or did they just stake it with you directly into a smart contract?
So directly into a smart contract, Morpheus has a capital smart contract. And after 7 days, you can pull out your ETH whenever you want. And the contract never has like control over your ETH, right? It can't be sent anywhere except for withdrawn by the person that deposited it. So it's basically just peeling off that rebase reward that comes out every day at 12 noon UTC from Lido, right? That yield is what gets sent into the protocol on liquidity. So that's been building up. I think they're already north of 800 ETH, so a couple of $1,000,000 of Ethereum rewards have already accrued into the protocol and liquidity. And so when the Uniswap pool starts, half of that yield will get deposited and a bunch of more will get deposited, and then you'll have a starting price. And then it'll be a free market and it'll be worth whatever it's worth. But it's such a cool bootstrapping mechanism. Thinking of it as almost like a rebirth, a reinvention of like the ICO, minus the company, minus the treasury, minus all the centralized components, and people can freely enter and exit, right? And maybe the big thing to understand is like this doesn't end May 8th. This is like the beginning. Like people can still continue earning more for the next 16 years. Like the emissions curve is really long. This is a long-term project, right? And so all that happens May 8th is you can claim what you've earned the first 90 days, right? And it sort of exits that bootstrapping period and the network kicks off. Right. But it's literally just the beginning. So if this is the first time you heard of it, like you haven't missed anything. The 90 days isn't the end. It's literally just the beginning of this whole process. So yeah.
You get like better, you get like more is your token for those who don't know the Morpheus token. Do you get more in the first 90 days than you get afterwards? I assume yes.
Just slightly. There isn't much of a difference because the decay rate in Morpheus, it started at 14,400 more per day. And it only decreases by like 2 more per day, right? That's how you get to 0 by the end of year 16. So it'll be like 1% less or, slightly less because the decay rate builds up every day. But no, there's not a big difference. And it's just going to continue following that supply curve the next 16 years.
Yeah, this is a pretty unique bootstrapping mechanism. I've never heard of it before, actually. I don't know if anyone's done it.
Yep.
You guys might be the first to do it. But it's very clever to use. Don't contribute your ETH, contribute your staked ETH, and give us your yield. And so that's a very new thing, right? So there is no risk to your ETH. That's great.
I like bootstrap mechanisms and fair launches, like where my money isn't at risk. Right? I was going to hold the Ethereum anyway. I'm happy to contribute like the yield to a cool new open source project I want to see exist, and so it sort of de-risks it, right? And I'm not holding, in some DeFi contract or something that's highly variable. It's ETH staking, right? It doesn't get much more de-risked if you want to hold Ethereum than to stake your ETH and continue holding Ethereum. Right, I've got the exact same number of ETH I started with, and now I have this other token that I've earned by contributing my yield.
And now, what is the more token used for? Has that been defined yet, or are you guys still figuring that out?
Oh, yeah. That's very clear in the white paper. Anybody holding more tokens has a pro rata right to the inference, to the compute for the AI models on the network. So what that looks like is if I hold more, I can go and request a bunch of prompts for images or text or whatever I want from people providing compute on the Morpheus network. And that's going to go live right after the token. We're talking like May or June because you had to have the token first to then pay the compute infrastructure people, right? So that's like the next phase of the whole ecosystem from the Genesis phase, before the fair launch to the frontier phase it's in now. It'll get into Homestead, sort of mirroring those same, Ethereum phases that famously they went through, right, to bootstrap the network. So yeah, that's the easy thing is one, if you hold more, you have access to AI compute, right? And then the second aspect in the phase after that is you start staking your more and you can point it at the projects you want to support, right? So it's rebuilding the same model based on Morpheus as it was with Ethereum. Okay, here's a new staking reward. What do all the AI projects need? They need inference. Great, I'm going to donate my yield, my more yield, my staking rewards towards the projects I want to support, right? So that's a whole nother phase, probably looking at July or August type of time frame.
Got it. So it's essentially, it's gas for users, if you will, right, to get access to the Morpheus AI network. And then it's also, you can basically stake the providers and donate your yield to them. What if I just want to make yield? I assume I can do that. Like, what if I'm selfish and I don't care? And
Sure. Well, and that should be the bar, right? A project that launches on Morpheus and wants to get the rewards ought to do better for you than just sending yourself the rewards, right?
Oh,
and that's a logical bar, right? For like, how do I know these are the right projects? You don't need a DAO. You don't need a bureaucracy. You don't need a committee. You don't need politics. Just let every individual decide who they want to support, what they want to point their yield at. And those projects can use the same Morpheus model and be issuing their own token. And then you've got the same calculations as before. Well, I'm going to hold my Morpheus anyway. I might as well support the staking rewards towards a cool new thing I want to exist, right? And the market will decide. Maybe 10% of people do that. Maybe 50% of people do that. We'll find out. But like that idea of generalizing this model, and the community's been calling this More 20, right? And here are the smart contracts. Here are the dashboards. Morpheus is all open source. If you want to raise staked ETH and do a fair launch, you can do that using Morpheus. So there's a ton of projects lining up announcements for next month where they're like, we're going to do More 20. We believe in a fair launch. Those are the values we care about. That's the approach we want to take. And that's so cool because that's, I think, the direction we need to take the whole industry is away from these centralized systems and just use smart contracts to solve all those problems. And okay, here's a generalized version of what Morpheus did. Go crazy. Like this is the way to launch a project now if you want to do a fair launch.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, the nuts and bolts very practically of what Morpheus is, because I think I have a better idea now. So just sort of generally, it's described as open smart agents. But more specifically, the way I understand it is you basically download something to your computer. And is that correct? There is a download?
Yeah.
Yes.
You could run a full node if you want. Yeah.
Okay. So I download. So the end vision is basically I have a personalized AI app that can interface to my wallet, my crypto wallet, and it can do things for me, and it can understand my requests as natural language requests. So let's say you and I have been through the ringer on DeFi, right? We've touched the wallets, we've used all this stuff, we've done highly complex financial acrobatics, right? Which is really cool, but also highly confusing. And also, no doubt, I'm sure you've burned yourself. I've burned myself. There is no way to learn about this stuff without burning yourself a few times on the oven, right? But it would be great if we could just, sort of talk to the Star Trek computer and say, like, computer, please increase my yield on Uniswap or whatever it is, right? And it just figures out the details and all the steps of how to do it, and it just goes and does it for me. And that is basically the end vision. Is that correct?
Well, and a basic version of that is live right now on Morpheus. If you went to mor.org, you can download the full node, connect it to your MetaMask, and tell it to send ETH to Bob or whatever address, and it'll follow those basic instructions, right? It understands what you're saying. It's connected to your wallet. It proposes the transaction, and you push the button to approve, right? And that's just a very basic demonstration. But yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. People are already building out, smart agents that can do DeFi transactions and swaps and everything you could think of, right? But I think most people will interact with this system through web interfaces, through dApps and applications. Like most people may not download the full node. They can if they want. But, you have to have a good enough laptop with enough space and everything to do that. And what we see from the history of Bitcoin and Ethereum, about 10 or 20,000 people in the world will run a full node, but most people want to use a light client. Most people want to use a web interface that's connected into these networks that they know are open source and are safe and follow all these rules, right? So yes, that's what it looks like, is you're going to end up with an app store full of smart agents that are deployed on Morpheus that have all the compute and capital and connections they need, right? And Morpheus becomes an easy way to discover them, right? You're just saying what you want to do, like, oh, I want to stake ETH. Great. The model already knows who are the top staking providers, and it can give you the options, right? You want to use a DEX? Great. Here are the top options. Here are the best smart agents to do that. So I think a lot of the next year is just people going to be wrapping the existing smart contracts, the existing dApps, and porting them over to a system like this. Now it has an interface, a chat interface with normal human language.
Oh,
now you can open up to 1 billion users that have no technical background. And they, like you're saying, they can use it safely because the AI has already been trained on what are the best systems to do this, which ones are non-custodial, which ones are decentralized, right? And you can set those preferences. Maybe you don't care about decentralization. Oh, I just want the fastest execution, right? That's your personal AI. That's up to you.
Okay, so it's not so the end vision is not really download something to your laptop, which you can do, but most people won't do. Just like most people don't run Bitcoin miners, but they use Bitcoin. It'll instead look like a chat interface to basically a bunch of apps that are hosted somewhere that somebody else is running a full node and has gone to the trouble of sort of setting everything up. And you'll have a menu of things that you can choose from, or agents that will do things for you. Or maybe you just enter in what you want to do and it chooses the agents for you or presents a list of options. And then you connect to it with your wallet, right? And then you can use it. That's
Well, take, for example, Eric Voorhees. He's been very public that he's building on Morpheus a uncensored, free AI that's like a permissionless chat GPT, right? Just starting with text and images. Like that's what hundreds of millions of people want to do. Like getting them into agents and DeFi and wallets, that's all like further down the funnel. But he's talking about announcing next month, his version of that, and having now Llama 3 is out there, which is just as fast and powerful as ChatGPT 4, right? So so this is something we talked about on our first talk, is the open source did it. It caught up with all those proprietary models, right? And is now surpassing, those proprietary models, which is not surprising, right? There's more compute and open source developers and data in the rest of the world than inside any one company, right? Which is why open source tends to win over time, right? So that's a great example. He's got a website and you just go to the website and just use it, right? You don't have to understand all the technical guts and the protocols and how it works. It's just fast and easy and it's uncensored and it gives you a great result. And that's what most people care about.
Yeah, I think most people don't care about DeFi. It was actually one of the things I was going to ask you about because I think it's great. Although I'm the sort of person where I would be sort of very reticent to sort of trust my wallet to a robot because I don't really know what it's doing. Like I get that there's safeguards in there. And I get that I'd still have to approve all the transactions on my end. It would propose transactions. It wouldn't just do them, right? It would be like, okay, I'm about to do this. Is this okay? And I'd be able to sort of look at it and be like, no or yes. So I understand that. But I also think that like the subset of people who want to use DeFi is very small. So I was, versus ChatGPT, right? So the fact that I guess where I'm going with this is, I did not know that Voorhees was actually building sort of a chat GPT on Morpheus. So this is really a more general purpose thing, really, when you get right down to it.
Sure.
Using agents. Why would you use agents as opposed to, I don't know, subnets like BitTensor does? What's the difference?
So BitTensor is great. Akasha is great, right? Those are all important parts of the stack. But think about them on the supply side. They're training great new models on subnets, right? Akasha is offering GPUs on their decentralized network. Morpheus is on the demand side. It's consuming those models. It's using that compute, right? It's the other side of the market. The smart agents are consuming all of those resources, right? Morpheus is not building a decentralized compute network or training models. People are getting rewarded. The BitTensors of the world, the Akash, community members of the world are getting rewarded by Morpheus using their resources, right? So it's really the other side of the network that you need, right? And I actually think there are billions of people who would use DeFi if it was easy and they understood the application. Because what's the basic output of DeFi? It's yield. How many people have a bank account and they want to get some interest on their money? Like, that's staking rewards. Like, we've reinvented the traditional finance world in an entirely decentralized way. So I think once you decode this and make it so easy to use, yes, the onboarding might be, I came for the chat. I came for the cool images for my kids. I came for making custom videos, but I stayed because it could do all these things for me, right? And that's sort of the generalized, rich environment that we want to get to. Just like I would say smart contracts are very generalized, right? That was the brilliance of Ethereum, is they didn't try to build specific use cases. They just made a platform. Release whatever you want, build any smart contract you want. We're just going to handle consensus and execution, and here's an EVM, right? That's the same thing with Morpheus. It's not building any of these things. It's just giving the building blocks that every app developer, every smart contract developer, every smart agent developer needs to deploy in this new context and do something on top of decentralized AI. And again, because it's a neutral platform, it's not owned by a protocol, it's not owned by a company, it's owned by this community. There's been a flood of people. Like since our chat, there have been over 200 open source developers contribute to Morpheus, like within a few weeks, right? There have been 5,000 people that have provided capital in the fair launch. And so if you create those incentives, there's also an incentive in Morpheus for smart agent builders, for application builders, for website builders. Like they're all included in this reward system that goes all the way from the bottom of compute and capital to the coding of the platform to the actual end user applications, right? And that's really cool. I haven't seen a lot of protocols that sort of have this full tech stack view of who needs to be rewarded, right? Usually it just goes to miners or it goes to capital providers, right? Like it's staking or it's proof of work. But usually the forgotten group is the developers. Like Ethereum, that was the key. They did that so well. Everybody that contributed early on to Ethereum got an airdrop of ETH. And most of those hundreds of developers went on to build cool stuff on Ethereum. Like that's normally the forgotten group. And so when I saw that in the Morpheus paper, I was like, yes, that is refreshing.
Yeah, I think actually Phantom does a pretty good job of this now, is they actually give gas rewards to apps that are, I forget what the rules are, but I think it's whoever's the most used. So whoever, nice. It's basically based on TVL, I think, or something. But basically it's meant to reward usage. So if you build something and a lot of people like it and use it, Phantom will just give you Phantom. So the Phantom Foundation will just award you a Phantom. So, and one of the things I don't like about BitTensor is it does not optimize emission rewards for usage. It optimizes for whoever votes on the coolest project, right? So it's optimized for science projects. It's not optimized for product market fit and true evolution that occurs in natural marketplaces. Whereas I believe Morpheus does reward for usage. It does solve for that. I think that's basically what you were saying. So does it monitor how often, I guess how many calls are made to a specific agent and reward based on that? Is that how it works?
So that's actually how the compute providers are rewarded. And this was a big thing that Eric Voorhees contributed, is he wrote a paper called the Yellowstone paper. And he's like, hey guys, instead of just doing the normal block reward thing, let's look at usage, right? Connect somebody that needs compute with somebody who wants to provide it. They can open a session. They could do 100 prompts. They could leave the session open for days. When they close that session, it only creates one transaction on chain. And that's the other thing. You don't want gas fees to be crazy. And so if you batch the transactions together in a session, and this is what's now been implemented by Ryan Condron, who built this, with the Lumen protocol for a marketplace for compute of hash rate. Now you have a marketplace for AI models, right? That's what he's extending to Morpheus and donating all of that code they spent the last 4 or 5 years building, right? And it's already on Arbitrum smart contracts anyway. So it was like a perfect alignment with the Morpheus infrastructure and what he and his team had already built. And they've open sourced it all. So why not contribute it to Morpheus, right? And make a version of that marketplace for AI compute. So yes, somebody will show up and said, hey, I'm running Llama 3 and I'll do it for, $1 an hour. And somebody open a session with me, right? And if that's the lowest cost and they have a good reputation, it gets matched, right? And the user, if they like the results, they'll keep the session open. If they don't, they'll close it, right? That's the feedback loop from the user feedback. But they leave it open for a day, for a week, for a month, whatever. And then it closes. The protocol pays the compute reward directly to the protocol provider. So I never spent my more tokens. I didn't lose my principal. I'm staking or hodling more, if you will, for Inference. And as long as I hold those more tokens, I have a pro rata right to the inference of the network. So I really want to hold Morpheus tokens because it's my access to intelligence. It's my access to AI compute.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. So I like what I like what you guys are doing better. So I am a fan of BitTensor, as you know. I've done several shows on Tau, and I think there's a lot that's good there. But I'm really bothered by the
Sure.
lack of product market, optimizing for usage and product market fit. And I'm really a fan of it. It makes sense that Voorhees would have sort of zeroed in on that same thing. And you gave me credit for doing the first show on Morpheus. The reason why I did it was because Voorhees pointed me at you guys, and Voorhees. What I found with Voorhees is he's the Mozart, and he's like dancing down the road that way. And I'm a Salieri. I'm smart enough to kind of get what he's doing, but I usually arrive later than he does. And when I get there, I find Voorhees standing there. Yeah, dude, I've been here like for months, right? That's been my experience, right? And
Yep.
Voorhees is incredibly smart and incredibly, he's sort of like a Daniel Webster type speaker, right? And his brain just works on another level. So, so once again, I have identified a problem, and lo and behold, Voorhees wrote a white paper on this shit like months ago, right?
Right.
Which is unfortunately for me a common experience, right? So, but I am Salieri. I am smart enough to get what he's doing, right? And I'm smarter than most people because most people aren't even here yet, right? So that's just unfortunately and fortunately where I'm at. So. Clear one thing up for me because I'm a little confused on this. When you talk about agents versus running an LLM model, what is an agent versus, like with ChatGPT, it runs, it's an LLM model, it runs somewhere in the sky. I poke it with a prompt and then it spits something out, right? So,
Sure.
Whereas agents, I guess, are sort of more like cron jobs where they wake up and do things on their own, or what's the difference between something that's just like a poke me thing and an agent?
So think about the foundation models, whether it's Llama 3 or News Hermes or Mistral, right? People have probably heard those names.
Yeah.
They're all like generalized, very general, right? They have an understanding of the world, right? They've ingested a lot of the internet and they could give you general answers. That's almost like an operating system, right? And it's usually good enough, but I don't just have an operating system on my iPhone. I have like 100 apps. The reason I have 100 apps is I need a narrow task-specific thing to take actions for me, right? And not just give me information. So if the generalized model is the operating system, the smart agents are the apps. They are a purpose-built thing that's going to take action, and they might use the model to do that. The model's understanding my intent. Here's what I want to do. But it's not going to take that action on my behalf. It's not connected to the APIs. It's not, tuned to do that narrow thing, right? So you need both an operating system and an application layer. So the foundation models, right? That's your operating system, and the smart agents are your application layer. And there are going to be thousands of smart agents. Just like, that's the mistake people made pre-Ethereum is they tried to bake all the use cases into the protocol. And Vitalik was like, no. Just have a generalized platform and let people build specific apps for every use case under the sun. They're going to be 10 times better than the one that, the three guys at the foundation can come up with and had time to focus on or cook up, right? And so you're separating that operating and application layer. So let me give you a new term that I think is really exciting in the ecosystem is non-fungible agents. So for the same reason that you have non-fungible tokens, you can have non-fungible agents. What that means is this agent isn't generalized. It's used for a specific purpose. It has an address connected to a specific developer, and they've built something that people will pay to use on the network, right? And there's an address they can pay to use it, and it may only apply to 10,000 people in the world that, want, images, fine-tuned to super sports cars cross, sectioned with dinosaurs, right? Like whatever that niche is. The cool thing about an app is it can fill a niche. It doesn't have to appeal to 100 million people. It can appeal to 100,000 people, right? And so that's the Cambrian explosion we're about to see is people releasing these apps on these AI platforms. Then you can do sort of anything. And again, I would use that difference between information and action, right? I want something that's going to take action on my behalf. Okay, well, the generalized models, not going to do that, right? It's going to give me information. It's going to enable me, but
Right.
I want something that's going to take the action and make this my life easier. That's why I've got all those apps. That's why I'm going to have all these smart agents.
Okay, so agents do things. They're not just they don't just sort of give you information and say, "Oh, you figured out, you do it." It's like, no, I'll go and do it. I'll work the wallet. I'll do the whatever the thing is, the task. I'm a I'm a task rabbit. I'm an AI task rabbit. And then the other thing is it's trained in a very specific and narrow way, so it's not generalized. So I am an expert on how to use. I'm an expert on how to use dexes. Like I know everything about dexes. I know how all of them work. I can go and do it. What do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do.
Yep.
I will then do it for you with your permission. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm not going to just go grab your wallet and do shit unless you tell me to do that and give me the permission to do that. But it's very sort of it'll just propose transactions.
Sure.
So it's not like because I was a little worried about like, oh shit, is this thing's going to go in my wallet? What if it hallucinates, right? Because we've all seen ChatGPT just lose its mind on this or that question, right? So that was actually a fear of mine. So okay,
sure, yeah. So you're doing the intent detection at the foundation level, but you can build a deterministic smart agent that's only connected to certain APIs. Like you're saying, maybe you want to use it for swaps. There are like 100 different dexes out there. I don't want to find the most efficient route, right? Somebody's going to build a wrapper on something like CowSwap. Great. It can do all the work of finding all the most efficient routes. As long as I get the most for my money, I don't care which route or which bridge or which whatever it goes through, just figure it out for me. That's exactly it. So it doesn't have to be tasks, but I think that's what a lot of people are going to start with because it's just so easy to put a wrapper on an existing DApp or an existing smart contract and just make it easier for a larger set of people to access and use.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people I know that are sort of somewhat conversant with, EVM chains. A lot of them don't even know that you should do stable swaps on Curve instead of a DEX. Right? Like that's not something that normally occurs to them. They don't know about Curve, right? Like that. And that's a pretty valuable thing to know if you're working at very large numbers of dollars, right? Because you go on an AMM, that thing will just take half of it. Well, maybe not half, but like it'll take a lot, and you'll feel it. It'll take a nice bite out of you as you go by, whereas Curve does not. So just little things like just knowing little things like that are incredibly valuable. So yeah,
sure. So let's get that as something baked into an app that 1 billion people can use. That you don't have to be the subject matter expert, like you're saying today. There's 10,000 people that know that, a few 100,000 people that know that well, right? And so let's expand that to anybody that can ask the question and express the intent.
So what chain is this thing on? Is this on a specific chain? It's on Arbitrum, I think.
So the Ethereum staking is done on mainnet Ethereum. And then people, when they're going to trigger their claim on ETH and they're going to mint those tokens on Arbitrum, right? Because you really want the lower fees for a lot of these use cases to send around the more tokens. But it's chain agnostic. The developers have already integrated both Layer 0 and Wormhole. So this is going to really quickly end up on all the Layer 2s, on Solana, on you name it. There's tons of proposals in the community on how to expand this because it's just a smart contract. So it's just going to get redeployed across all those chains and across all that infrastructure. And thanks to Layer 0 and Wormhole, you've already got a messaging layer that can handle all those token transfers, right? The infrastructure is there now to really be multi-chain day one.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. So the rewards basically are, from what I understand, are split into sort of 4 groups. Community, capital, compute, and code, I think you guys call it. And then, the pools are rewarded over 60. Yeah, so that's a 16-year reward cycle. And we're not really worrying about what happens after the 16 years because that might as well be like, in the Jetsons future.
Well, to be fair, the paper does include a burning mechanism is expected to be implemented. And after the 16 years, it takes half of the burned tokens and makes that the new emissions pool. And so if you go through that, you've got like 16-year epochs. It has a plan for the first 256 years. So yeah, beyond that, they'll figure it out. But at least for the first 256 years, it's going to be set. So
yeah. So let me ask you another question, sort of out of left field, but I think it's sort of increasingly becoming important. So there was a new proposal. I'm trying to remember the details of it. I apologize, I didn't write it down. But there was a new proposal it was for the California Senate, backed by
Yep.
OpenAI, where they were basically trying to say anybody running AI that's not OpenAI or somebody we approve of, you can't. It's illegal. No open source. Like, what do you think all these AI laws, both at the California level and the national level and in other countries, AI safety, which might come along and tend to make Morpheus illegal in certain jurisdictions? How are you guys thinking about that? Does that bother you, or what are your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, I think that's why it's so important that Morpheus is really structured almost like a Bitcoin. Like, nobody knows who the authors of the paper were, right? There's no company, there's no foundation. Like, who is Morpheus? It's sort of like we're all Morpheus, right? There's 200 co-contributors. From what I know, I mean, half of them are on. Yeah, exactly. But half of them are Anon, and in Europe or Asia, I don't even know where they are, right? And so it's like, you have to have a protocol that's jurisdiction agnostic. That was the genius of Satoshi, right? Is he didn't have a company, and he didn't have a foundation. There was no place to poke because, like, the network just ran. Like, short of shutting down Ethereum, how are you going to stop the Morpheus smart contracts from continuing to operate? Like, there's no man behind the curtain with a magic button that runs Morpheus, right? It's just smart contracts on decentralized, open source blockchains. And so I think that's the approach. But if you look at the law, most of them have to do with companies. Like, the executive order, for example, was all about, like, companies training models, companies running data centers, right? All this stuff. And so if the US decides to become unfriendly to centralized AI startups, like, basically, if you're not in the 100 billion club with OpenAI, you don't get the magic, holy water sprinkled on you, right? Then that's just going to move overseas. But it's not going to stop the end user from doing a peer-to-peer system where nobody else is holding their data, nobody else is holding their money. Most regulation has to do with companies and organizations, not so much with end users, right? Which is why people were able to use Bitcoin even before it was friendly in the US to do Bitcoin mining. Because you didn't need to have all the mining in Bitcoin in the US, right? Most of it was overseas for most of the history of crypto, right? And so we may go through that same period, right? So far, the UK has said they're going to be friendly. The EU and the US have said they're going to be unfriendly. China's going to be unfriendly. India's actually backed off their unfriendly stance and now saying they're not going to regulate, which is a huge deal. So now you've got the UK, you probably have Switzerland, you probably have India, a few other places. It's going to go wherever it's friendly to do that. That's where the people running the GPUs are going to show up. That's where the developers are going to be based. That's where those expertises will flow into Dubai, into all those friendly jurisdictions, right? And so Morpheus is built to be uncensorable. It's built to be fully decentralized. Like, there's no treasury, there's no bank account, there's no anything, right?
So let me ask you one question about that. So if I am running an agent, if I am an agent provider, I, in fact, am hosting that agent on AWS, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm using Akash or something like that.
Exactly.
So that's
the compute's all decentralized. The capital's all decentralized. What does it even mean to run an agent? You deployed some code, and it's running on a decentralized network and being rewarded in a decentralized wallet. You might not even have your name associated.
But there's always
with the agent
somewhere that's physical, right? Like, even in the Akash network,
sure.
Yes, it's a decentralized cloud, but really, if in the real world somewhere there is an actual physical machine in a physical building that some dude owns, right? Or maybe a woman, right? Like, we don't know. So, but it is a person, a human, owns that machine in a physical space. It's got an address. It's got power bills. That can be shut down if that can be identified. So,
sure, but again, there's a prisoner's dilemma among the governments. The first one that's friendly wins. They get billions of dollars of investment. They get a bunch of new capital inflows. Switzerland won that for crypto, right? Yeah, most of the foundations are in Switzerland or Singapore. They could have been anywhere, and the power flowed to cheap, reliable, good property rights jurisdictions, right? At the end of the day, that's been Texas. but that, cheap power used to be China until they became unfriendly, and then all the miners moved, right? And so again, I think people imagine that governments are this monolithic thing that all coordinate. They're not. They're competitive. They're not aligned with each other. They have different incentives. They have different values, right? And the local guy just wants to make a buck, right? And so he's the city economic development guy. He has every reason in the world to welcome this, poor refugees flowing in from San Francisco that now have to go to London, right? Like they're doing that on purpose. Like it's not by accident. They literally in London held the safety summit, and they were the only major country to announce they wouldn't regulate foundation models, right?
Yeah,
and so there's going to be friendly jurisdictions. People are going to go to the friendly jurisdictions. We're just in 2014 again, and we're finding out which are those friendly jurisdictions for AI, just like we found them after crypto.
Yeah, there was another action recently. It wasn't so normally these things are laws that are debated in Congress, and there's some good people that debate the right way, right? So you've got your Loomises and et cetera, and McHenrys who are advocating for crypto and these decentralized things and understand it and are kind of, and they want to see America win, like America won at the internet, right? And we want the next Google here, we want the next Amazon here. We don't want it in Dubai. That's bad for us, right? So, however, the sort of thing that's been happening recently is instead of having these bills debated in Congress, various departments just start making random rules, which sort of are laws. They're not really laws that are passed, but they're rules that agencies have, right? Like SEC gives guidance, so they can sort of make their own make their own laws. Really, what it boils down to. The SEC has famously been doing this, but there was a new action from the U.S. Department of Commerce around KYC being required for clouds, CDNs, VPNs, DNS servers. So any product that provides processing, storage, networks, or other fundamental computing resources. So, and they say that this is to, it's aimed at external threats, but really it's a way to impose KYC on domestic users. So let me just read this here. According to the proposal, anyone or all people from a specified jurisdiction at the government's wrong part of it. Upon notification, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, sorry, I'm just going to summarize because this is not quite saying what I thought it did. They're basically saying if you use AWS, you are now required to provide KYC. So an ID, proof of residence, who are you? You basically have to go through a vetting process. And this would, I think, theoretically be true to use Akash or any decentralized, AI provider as well, right? That feels bad. Right? And this is not a law, it's not a rule yet, it's not a law, but it's proposed. But it looks like this is how they're trying to do things now. And it's kind of, I find it disturbing.
Well, yeah, Congress has effectively outsourced and delegated all of the lawmaking to regulators, and their statutes carry the weight of law. Like, you can try to fight it in court, but it's the same as if it was passed. They just create an agency now, and the agency creates 10,000 rules. They don't bother as a lawmaker to make any of those decisions anymore. So yeah, that's where we're at. And we talked about this on the first talk. What lit the fire under the community was the executive order last October. And it included all of these KYC, licensing, registration requirements that the agencies are now implementing, right? And that's what people didn't miss. People told me at the time, oh, they'll never do that. That would be too complex. That would be too complicated. KYC for my data center. It's like, yes, they are doing that. The public comment periods for a lot of these have already been opened and closed, and they're now implementing them. And there's no political process to stop it, right? Because you'd need effectively to pass a law or for the regime to change to overturn the executive order or something like that. And
there's
so,
no
this is
on these rules. That's kind of what
there's no checks and balances on these rules whatsoever, right? And so the most draconian, though, beyond the KYC, which will be inconvenient and expensive and a new barrier, the most draconian one is the Commerce Department is going to determine if open source weights constitute dual use weapons. And just having the database of the open source model will constitute a weapon that'll be a felony for a U.S. person to disclose to a foreigner. Like, this is 1991 encryption wars, Phil Zimmerman all over again.
Yes,
right? And they didn't win, right? But it took a long time. He beat them in the courts in 95. But it wasn't until 99 that they formally rescinded the restrictions. So we may be entering a 5 to 10 year process where everybody knows these rules are unconstitutional. Clearly, they're a violation of the First Amendment. I should be able to use language and math, print them on a t-shirt, put them in a book, put them in a database. But we're going to pretend, for a while that these rules, stand up. So maybe it'll get fought in the courts faster this time. But I think we have to expect that these rules are going to happen. And that's the urgency to build decentralized AI now, right? Before these things come into effect. And we're going to, the people are going to have to operate them wherever the friendly jurisdictions are. But the first step is building it. The first step is open sourcing it, right? It's pulling a Phil Zimmerman, releasing PGP as an encryption standard, right? And open sourcing it to the world. And it sort of made their efforts to stop encryption impossible, right? And so the community has been like, that's literally the patron saint of the decentralized AI movement is Phil Zimmerman, right? I put out this picture, at every decentralized AI summit and DAI day.
Did you see, by the way, did you see what Jack tweeted this week? So he basically put up the cover of Wired from like 93 or something like that. And it was all about this Phil Zimmerman thing and cypherpunks are fighting for your rights kind of thing, right? And he's like, this is what Wired used to be. And he put up an article from Wired now. It's like the 25 most watched shows on Apple TV. It's like it's completely been neutered, right? From what it was. You either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm very optimistic that decentralized AI is going to win. But we're just in 2014, right? The bit license has been passed. They're implementing all these restrictions. Banks are trying to push crypto overseas, but that's not going to stop people. Like, I will literally move anywhere on the face of the earth that I have to participate in the most disruptive technology. I moved to Puerto Rico when I need to move to Puerto Rico. If I have to go to London, if the US wants to push me out to London, I'll spend 5 years in London, right? I'll do my time in exile. And then when it wins in the courts, maybe I can come back. But hopefully, as a US person, I don't want to leave. And I think we're actually getting to the point where they're losing in the courts, and we've got resources now, and we can actually fight this fight at scale, right? Not just as activists, but as a real community and industry, right? That I want to stay, right? And I should be able to, write code and say things. Like, that's, I can't get much safer than like the first, I don't have anybody's money. Like, I don't control any of the research. There's no treasury Morpheus. I don't even know who the inventors are. The developers are all over the world. Like, they can hassle me if they want, but it's not going to have any effect on the system itself or continuing to operate. And so, I think it's time to take a stand and be like, we're here. We have the right to be here. We're on the right side of history. Let's be here. Let's build this, and okay, they're going to push the computer over shores. It is what it is, but I can at least speak about it. I can at least write code. And that's kind of where you draw the line, because if you can't speak about it and you've lost the intellectual ability to engage in debate or even voice your opinion, like that's when you jump over the wall. That's when there's no point in staying, is when like that wall gets knocked down. But I think it's worth fighting for that wall.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you that we are at an inflection point. So I think America is at a point where we're either going to solve these problems and push back the trends of the last, 8 years, whatever it is. So you can define it in many different ways. But, a lot of the bad things that have sort of encroached on the freedoms of the Constitution, I think a lot more people are aware of that these things are happening now than they were maybe even a year ago. And there's a lot more people going, oh, shit, I didn't know this was happening in the United States, right? So I think that there's gathering momentum to push the pendulum back the other direction. And I think we're very quickly coming up on a period where we'll either successfully do that and kind of stake the vampires and stick them back in their coffins, or we won't, or the vampires will get out and we'll be run by vampires, right? It's one or the other, I think, pretty soon. That's what it feels like to me. So I'm hoping that the Van Helsings win, right, in that scenario. So, and I think there's a good chance that the Van Helsings will win because the Constitution is fundamentally strong and is in operation still for the most part, right? So I think there's hope. I think there's a lot of reason for hope. So it's kind of where I'm at.
Absolutely.
So what have we not discussed that that you think we should cover? Is there anything?
We talked about the wave of projects that can, adopt this fair launch more 20 platform. I'm really excited about that because then you offer resources to everybody that wants to build this technology, regardless of where they live or, who they are. We've talked about Llama 3 and the huge advancements that have been made in the open source models. Like that can't be understated.
That is amazing. I remember you saying that it was going to happen, but I was kind of like, yeah, dude, I don't know. It's like, how does that actually happen? And lo and behold, it did happen. So congratulations to you. You get the Nostradamus Award of this show.
Well, it's funny. My friend Anna pointed out that if you look at the number of GPUs that used to mine Ethereum before they switched to proof of stake, and you look at how many GPUs were to train GPT-4, 50 times as many GPUs were used to mine Ethereum than were used to train GPT-4. Like, crypto has the compute. We have the resources. We have billion-dollar networks. If you point the incentives in the right direction, it's going to blow out all those centralized models. Like, think about Bitcoin has more compute than any nation state on the face of the earth at this point. It's going to be the same, but for decentralized AI compute, right? That's where we're headed. And so I have faith in those economics. I have faith in the free market that if you put the right economics and incentives in place, like, people will find a way. Like, capitalism finds a way, right? And so, that's maybe the note to make is, like, personal AI is here. We got the good models now. So even if the restrictions get a little crazy, we've got a really solid foundation to build from. Not toys, not inferior stuff, like top grade, gold standard models that we can build off of. No matter what happens next. And so I feel really good about that. Just participate in the community, right? To have a project where, like, literally anybody, it doesn't matter if you got compute or capital or coding skills or whatever, like, you can join and be part of it. And that's what really I loved about Bitcoin and Ethereum in the early days is, like, it was sort of like everybody is welcome. And, there's no barriers or politics or, you don't have to appeal to anybody. It's a permissionless system, right? And so, I think it's headed in the right direction. It's been a really incredible journey, and I appreciate, your work in this ecosystem to help people understand all of these new technologies that are coming out, because it's going to be really important very soon.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. Actually, there is one thing in my notes that I didn't bring up, which I probably should have, is that the agents in your universe are composable. So they can like, it's sort of like DeFi, right? Where these things can use the things below it or across from it in a Lego-like fashion. And the power of that ability to compose from all these, use the atoms to make molecules, to make organics, like that kind of thing is insanely powerful. And I think the way you guys have built, to encourage composability is quite impressive. And I actually don't see that as much in the other systems. So, like BitTensor, all the subnets are like their own little universes, right? You have the Marvel universe and you have the DC universe, and they theoretically can interoperate, but they're not really meant to, right? So, whereas I think in your universe, there's a lot more sort of natural composability. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that sort of builds on the fact that it's on Ethereum and it's on a blockchain and it's using the same, ERC20, ERC721 standards. And that's sort of what made all those building blocks so powerful. And it's just been a process of mapping those same building blocks and handing that to smart agent builders.
Very cool. Well, David, always a pleasure to have you on the show. And congratulations on all the recent success. You guys have come out of the gate swinging. Anything else you'd like to plug before we go? Like your Twitter handle?
Sure. I mean, if you want to get involved, MOR.org is one of the most popular community websites. It's the one the Air Force donated to the community. It's got the Discord link and the Telegram link and the all of the social stuff. You can find me at Johnston EC on X. Just jump in and keep being awesome. That's all I got.
Well, rock on, David. Thanks for being here. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.